I'm Michael Peters, sports editor of the Tulsa World, sitting alongside columnist Dave Sittler, here for another edition of Sports Extra on Demand. So all the rage this week, Brandon Weeden, the next flavor of the day for the Heisman Trophy. Is he, can he seriously win the trophy? Is he going to join Barry Sanders as the only two OSU Cowboys with a Heisman?
I think he will. I think it's set up perfect for him if they beat Iowa State this week, which they should, because the OU game on December 3rd, Trent Richardson, Alabama, they're not playing. Luck, Stanford, they're not playing. He's really going to be the only one of the leading candidates that's playing. Now, he will have to beat OU, and he'll have to play well against OU. But, yeah, I think he's got a legitimate shot. Right now, him and Luck are maybe 1-2.
Yeah, I think he has to win, and people have said, what happens if he throws for 500 yards and 6 touchdowns and they lose? I said, well, he doesn't win the trophy. And in fact, I think he could throw for 500 yards and 6 touchdowns and win, and they'll be carrying him to New York on their shoulders and handing him the trophy. And if he has the same exact game and a loss, I think he finishes second or third or fourth. I think it's that big of a difference because results matter. As we saw this weekend with Stanford and Oregon, Andrew Luck is kind of the presumptive favorite all year because he's the #1 draft pick for an NFL. Well, no, and it is silly, but it's sort of the kind of the beauty pageant that it's become. And he has one bad game against a team that they lose to, and now all of a sudden he's no longer the favorite, even though his play in that game, although it was nothing special, it was nothing, hugely detrimental. So it is somewhat unfair, but that one game, Brandon Weeden, OSU's success and Brandon Weeden's success are all going to hinge probably on Bedlam.
Yeah, right. Like I wrote the other day, is how many games would OSU win if they didn't have Weeden? And I think they'd struggle to win 7. I said 6 maybe. I asked Mike Gunny that question. He started to answer it, and then he didn't. He left it up to me. But to me, it should be the best player in college football. Maybe not on the best team, but the best player. And I think you can't deny what Weeden has done for that program. They may never get to this place again. They're here because of him.
Right. Well, I guess we talked about ask Mac Brown how important it is to have a dynamic quarterback, and then at the same time too is it's OSU. As we talked about, it's kind of been the theme of the year that things have really gone in OSU's direction. If LSU had a dominant offensive player, that person would probably have already kind of claimed the trophy, barring an upset down the stretch. If their quarterback was somebody who was in the same league even as Brandon Weeden in terms of dynamics, that guy would already have it because they're the dominant team. It's just sort of the, kind of the beauty pageant that it's become. And of course, no defensive players can win it because,
which is too bad.
Which is very much too bad because we don't, appreciate that side of the ball quite as much. Now, back into this discussion, Oklahoma gets back to play after they've had a week off. They've had an opportunity to kind of mix in some offense without Ryan Broyles, another week without Dominique Whaley. Still, the discussion is they had a good week in the BCS with Stanford losing, Boise losing. Those are 2 undefeated teams that they don't have to mess with now. What is their prognosis now for the next couple of weeks? Baylor and Iowa State, and then on to Bedlam and perhaps a chance to play themselves back into the national title game.
I think we're going to find out now if Landry Jones really has matured, because as I wrote today, Ryan Broyles has always been kind of his security blanket. He always knows he's there. I think they have the receivers that can maybe not make up as one person with Broyles, but they can fill in enough to give. But Jones has got to be the leader now. They win at Waco. They're going to beat Iowa State, and then they go to Stillwater. And I think they've got to have a lot of good things, Michael, happen for them to get into BCS. I think it's a real long shot for them to get in it, which is going to drive Sooner fans nuts, which it should all off season. How did they lose to a team that I watched in person lose by 60 to OSU?
Well, and the thing is, too, and what I thought was embarrassing, that team quit on Saturday against Oklahoma State. It wasn't just that Oklahoma State overwhelmed them and that was fine, but that team just flat laid down once it got to be about 21-0, and that's embarrassing really to have that kind of performance and to really struggle like that. And like I say, once again, the theme of the year, things falling right for Oklahoma State. Does Oklahoma have enough firepower now to catch up with them in Bedlam? And I'm not necessarily sure that they do without Ryan Broyles and Dominique Whaley.
Yeah, I'm not either, because last year OSU scored 41 on them with Broyles, and Whaley wasn't there. They had other running backs, but Whaley was there, but he didn't start. I don't know. I think this right now I'd lean toward Oklahoma State, but there's always that, can Oklahoma State finally win a big game against anybody, especially against them.
Especially
But
against
to me,
Bob
what is OSU's season a failure if they lose Bedlam?
I don't know that it's a failure necessarily, but I mean, if they don't win the Big 12 championship game, if they don't win, if that kicks them out of a BCS game, I go back to the same thing we talked about with Mike Gundy's contract. What am I paying him for?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not paying him to win 10 games and then to lose to Bob Stoops every year.
Yeah,
I'm
but
not paying him not to win the Big 12 championship game. I mean, at some point you have to break through. At some point, if you want to get paid and if you want to raise the level of your program to that spot, then you have to win that game. And so it's not necessarily a failure, but it is going to be a pretty big disappointment to have gotten to this stage and then to have fallen back at Bedlam.
I think they'll get in a BCS Bowl even if they lose that game, but maybe you can have a rematch in the Fiesta Bowl of Bedlam.
They could do that.
Something like that. But I see where you're coming from, but OU doesn't pay Bob Stoops $5 million a year to lose to Texas Tech either.
Well, that's true.
I mean, granted, he's done a lot of things to get a contract that's really kind of obscene, but and I've told him that in person, so I'm not revealing anything here. And I mean, $5 million, come on, and you lose to Texas Tech. But I think Mike Gundy, if he loses to them, but wins and gets to a BCS Bowl and wins it, why wouldn't they give him a contract extension?
I think they might, and also that would be the Texas pattern because that's what Texas did. That's how Mac Brown finally broke through. They broke through where they didn't win the Big 12 championship game. They got in the Rose Bowl. They won that game in dramatic fashion, I guess, against Michigan, and they came back the next year, went right back to the Rose Bowl and beat USC. So that is sort of the pattern. Sometimes you have to make those steps, but I really think that they have to get in the BCS game. They have to win it. Just to kind of make those steps if they don't beat Oklahoma State, if they don't win the Big 12. I think that's the kind of key to make this a successful year.
So you wouldn't give Gundy a new contract until January?
Oh, I definitely wouldn't give him a new contract until January.
See, I think,
and if he wants to go to North Carolina, I'd help him pack the truck.
Why?
because we're still talking about. North Carolina is a strictly a negotiating ploy by people in his camp, and if he wants that job bad enough, which is a step down from the job he has now, then go get him.
Not as hard a job. It's not as hard a job.
But all the things that he's mad about, that he's getting paid less money committed to him than the basketball coach.
Well, I think it's the longevity.
That he's the number 2 coach in his state. All those things are even worse at North Carolina because he's not even the number 1 coach on his campus at North Carolina.
Well, I don't think he cares about that as much. I think he wants the 10-year stability. That how Travis Ford got that, I don't know.
No, but that's a different issue.
You can give a guy a contract. He's already admitted he's feeling the pressure of this situation, as we discussed. Take the pressure off of him. Give him the extension. And because this is a perfect marriage, Mike Gundy and OSU. But they seem to have the attitude, anybody can do this now. And if Mike Holder really loves Larry Fedora like he thinks he does, he better hurry up because I guess Ole Miss is going to hire him.
Sure, because and Southern Miss is going to probably play for the CUSA championship game, maybe against Tulsa here in town. It could be an audition for Larry Fedora in 45 minutes away.
That would be great. Can they beat Houston, Tulsa?
I still don't think necessarily they can beat Houston, but
he used to live in Houston.
Houston's best win is against UCLA though, and that's not impressive.
I think that TU's defensive improvement this year has been as impressive as anything.
I agree.
With what they've done, and looking forward to seeing that game the day after Thanksgiving.
Right. And
be a great weekend.
And great job for Bill Blankenship, and he's really done a good job because
he really has.
He had the potential to lose this team, and with the big early games they played against difficult opponents and the adversity they faced without Damaris Johnson, and he's done a great job of really kind of taking it and keeping this on track. And now they're going to have a chance for one shot against U of H the day after Thanksgiving in town to play for the division championship.
Is Mike Gundy the Big 12 Coach of the Year or Bill Snyder?
Oh, that's good. That's a good question. It would probably depend on Bedlam. If Mike Gundy wins Bedlam, he's the Coach of the Year. But Bill Snyder's done a heck of a job to take what he's gotten. He's going to be the 3rd best team in the conference by far. Well, that's all we have time for this week. Join us next week for another edition of Sports Extra On Demand.